Now, our guests this morning are Mary Byrne, founder and director of Aisling Group International. She's joining us in studio with Darragh O'Loughlin, president of the IPU, the Irish Pharmacy Union. And like when most of us think of drug addicts, we think of cannabis, heroin, cocaine and other illegal substances. But legal drugs may be an even bigger problem. According to the National Advisory Council on Drugs, addiction to over-the-counter and prescription drugs has reached almost epidemic proportions in Ireland. So that's our topic this morning.
As you said, we do really want to hear from people on this. So 53106, as Ivan said, or twitter.com/breakfastnt. And one listener who got in touch spoke to us. We don't want to name this person, but spoke to us, described herself as a recovering addict. And this is what she had to say about her experiences.
I had an addiction problem since I was 13 years of age, from soft drugs and over-the-counter medication from pharmacies, from GPs. I know how hard it is to try and contain a habit when you get addicted to a drug through an accident, because I hurt my wrist and I got addicted to painkillers and codeine, and I used to buy bottles of codeine Lintus in the shop. I'm a number of years clean now, and I still find it hard to go daily. With the support of my husband and my family, I wouldn't be able to.
One person's story there. Mary Byrne, in the Aisling Group International, do you see many people presenting from addiction to over-the-counter and prescription drugs?
Yes, and there's an unprecedented rise in, I would say, the last 2 to 3 years, and people might put that down to the economic situation, but I don't believe that's the truth on it. I think actually that there is such an availability of prescription medications now that and no alternative as such to that, and I think GPs would agree in their own right that you don't have counselling and so on for problems, but Ireland has twice the European average of drug problems anyway, and on the back of that now we've thrown in legalised drugs basically.
Well, if you take a particular painkiller and you become addicted to it, how deleterious is it to your health?
Well, I mean, if it's not taken, and I'm sure other experts will speak on that, but if it's not taken within the prescribed medicated dose, or it's combined with alcohol and so on, and as you can imagine, a lot of people who are coming into us maybe are using alcohol also, then they're high risk to their health and to their well-being. There are withdrawal symptoms from some of the drugs that they're not aware of, especially morphine-based medications.
What drugs are we talking about here?
Well, it has become a little bit more regularised around Nurofen Plus and some of the over-the-counter medications. We would have had someone who was using maybe taking 48 Nurofen Plus per day. Now, even though it's regulated here, you still can get them, but you also can buy them across the border, and they're for sale on the street anyway, a lot of drugs, because people who are on other substances, for instance like methadone, who are receiving whether it's painkillers or antidepressants, are actually selling on their drugs at street level.
Darragh O'Loughlin, president of the IPU, I hear the word codeine repeated a lot. What is codeine? What branded products is it found in?
Codeine is, chemically speaking, it's an opiate, which means it's related to opium, just like Marie says, like morphine is, but obviously it's a lot milder than morphine or heroin. It's found in a number of non-prescription pain relievers such as Nurofen Plus or Solpadeine, Feminax or Migraleave. And because it's an opiate, it has the possibility of creating addiction in people who use it either at too high a level or for a prolonged period of time. And it's because of that and the fact that the addiction can be quite insidious. It can creep up on patients who don't realise they're becoming dependent on a pain reliever, but they're taking it on an ongoing basis, maybe for chronic pain such as backache or osteoarthritis. And then they realise when they don't have the pain reliever, they feel anxiety, they feel restlessness, they might get a headache, and that's actually a withdrawal from the codeine that they've been taking for too long a period. But the automatic response to this headache is to take more of the pain reliever, and that just gets them trapped in a vicious cycle.
And Darragh, it is, and many people listening to this know that there have been new guidelines introduced, and I had a god-awful earache and throat infection earlier in the year, and I went to one pharmacy and it was like a job interview to try and get one of the products you've mentioned there, and then I went to another and the next day or whenever down the line, and it was no questions asked. So I know guidelines are there and some people are enforcing them, but what type of scrutiny are people supposed to go under when they come into a pharmacy looking for some of the products you've mentioned?
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as a scrutiny on the patient. The aim of the guidelines and what the pharmacist is trying to achieve there when he interviews you or she interviews you is to establish what it is you're using it for, how long you've been using it for, and to make sure that you're aware as the patient, you're aware of the risks of taking the product either for too long or at too high a dose, and that you're aware of both the potential for addiction and other side effects. So,
can they refuse sale?
Oh yes, they're professionally obliged to refuse a sale if they believe that it's not in your interests to take that medicine. They'll recommend something else, or else they'll recommend another course of action, such as seeing your GP or seeing a physiotherapist or whatever might be appropriate.
And we spoke, I suppose, Mary spoke about some of the people who would use it to complement something else, had they been on methadone or something like that. But you're actually, the core group and the vast percentage of people we're talking about here are people who don't consider themselves addicted and don't realise that there's a path to addiction from, like you say, taking that pill again to get rid of the headache.
Yeah, there's a condition, for example, called rebound headache, and it's actually caused by headache pills. So somebody who has a headache who is susceptible to that condition will take a pain reliever for it. When the pain reliever wears off, the headache will reoccur, but it isn't the original headache, it's actually a rebound from the pain reliever, but they automatically reach for more pain relievers. It eliminates the headache, and then 8 or 12 hours later they have it again, so they take more, and they do get trapped in this cycle. And the way to break that is actually to go without pain relief, and although the headache will get worse, for short term it goes away ultimately.
Darragh, just for now, we're talking about pain relief, but what other products? I mean, sleep is one that we commonly hear. People who start off having problems sleeping, then they manage to regulate their sleeping through some sort of an aid, and then they're hooked on it.
Yes, when people go through a stressful period, such as a bereavement or business difficulties, or whatever the source of stress might be, and they're not sleeping, they go to a GP who will prescribe often a short course of sleeping tablets, which will be either benzodiazepine related or what they call the Z drug, Zopiclone or Zolpidem. And they're fine and they're safe if they're taken for a short period of time, either for insomnia or for anxiety. But unfortunately, again, if those medicines are taken for a prolonged period, they can cause addiction or dependency. The Rolling Stones song Mother's Little Helper, which talked about the yellow pill, that was actually probably Valium, which is a benzodiazepine, which relieves anxiety in the short term but can be addictive in the long term.
And what is the correct term? Because, you know, you get onto this because, like you're saying, you're going through this period and a doctor prescribes it, but is it set in stone that 3 weeks, 2 weeks, no longer than that?
The GP will deal individually with every patient, but realistically nobody should be on long-term prescriptions for these. There are prescribing guidelines there for the GPs which actually state how these should be implemented. And they've been in place since 2001, and I know that there are moves afoot to try and tighten up on that again. The difficulty is that some people who are dependent on these are not actually going to their regular GP for them. They're shopping around to find GPs that are willing to write prescriptions. There was a primetime show on it just 2 weeks ago. And also, a lot of the ones that are on the streets, the ones that Marie has referred to that are being bought illicitly, they're being sold by people who have robbed pharmacies at gunpoint or at knife point to steal all of the benzodiazepines in order to satisfy their own craving and sell them on the street.
Mary, the solution to this, I mean, is it that some GPs are just too trigger happy with prescriptions too fast and loose, or is it that more over-the-counter medicines should actually require a prescription, or both, or neither?
Well, it's both really, but absolutely, and I have no doubt on this, that there are GPs who are over-prescribing. And I know there was a case that was reported to police or Gardaí in the Cork area, I think it was last year in November, and it was about the over-prescription around from a GP. I think we have situations, and as our other speaker pointed out, is that people are going to their GPs and being prescribed things for stress. But that seems to be their first port of call, is their GP. And the GP is not trained in counselling or in addiction or in that area at all. To the best of my knowledge, there are very few of them who are trained in that, because they're actually referring people into us and asking us for advice and telling us that they don't deal in that area. And I think it's very wise and responsible that they would send people also into a service where there is a bereavement or there is another problem going on, because what's happening is people are going in, they're being given a lot of medications, We usually run a scan on their medications. They're unaware of the side effects from many of these substances, and I would refer to what the caller said earlier about a soft drug. I don't believe there is such a thing as a soft drug. If it's misused, it's dangerous. And I think that when you look at the side effects, for instance, there are people coming into us on antidepressants, and we actually find that in some cases they're more depressed and have more suicidal thoughts. And I know that that's an issue for under 25s in relation to antidepressants. So we're actually having to work with the GPs and put pressure on to try and get them to look at the whole situation.
Well, first steps to getting off. Let's talk about the fact that, okay, this has happened. There's a spectrum here. So it might be that you're taking painkillers and you're functioning with your job and all of that, or it might be more extreme, like you've just gone through there. Steps of calling time on it. I mean, surely personal responsibility is right up the top.
It is, but the problem is when you've crossed the line and become addicted to a substance, then that takes away a lot of your free will for a time until you get into a service where you learn there are other methods in coming off the substance. I mean, people assume that people who are addicted are just not bothering to get off. We have people begging us to take them off medications, including prescription drugs. What we have to do is work with the GP on that, because there can be difficulties if someone stops cold on some of the medications. They can have tremors and so on. Alcohol, funny enough, is one of the most dangerous. But so we need to work with the GP. But sometimes we do find there's a reluctance, whether it's with especially a methadone, that for people to reduce the doses.
And can you tell me about, and it's very hard to class it as one person, but the typical patient with this type of thing? I'm talking background, age, sex, social class, that type of thing?
Everything now, because we have underage people coming in who are addicted to, there are people coming in who are on antidepressants who are quite young. I've never seen anything like it as I have in the last 2 years, and it makes our job of taking them off extremely difficult. But you're also getting the housewife at home who's, depressed in some way. But depression is a very general term for a depressing of the feelings. There's something else going on, and if you deal with that, you probably won't need half of these medications. Truthfully, I don't think we need half of them.
Does it cover all social classes?
Yes, absolutely. If you have money, a lot more money, you'll probably go to the doctor, and if he prescribes, it might be more expensive or it may not, but it doesn't matter where you come from now.
Darragh, I saw at one point
when
Mary was speaking, you were shaking your head there.
Yes, I think there's a tendency to blame GPs for this, and I don't want this to be a GP bashing exercise. They're not writing prescriptions willy-nilly. They're out there working really, really hard, often under difficult circumstances, to do the best for their patients, and there aren't any other places in the majority of cases for them to refer a patient whom they have identified has dependency issues with, for example, benzodiazepines. And I also think that we should be very careful not to class everybody who takes an antidepressant medication or an anti-anxiety medication as a potential addict. The vast majority of people who are taking medicine, and the evidence is there, the vast majority of people who take medicine, they take it appropriately, supervised adequately by their GP, and they're getting the help and the assistance that they need, and they benefit from it. I accept that there is a significant minority of patients who do develop difficulties around side effects or dependency, but I certainly wouldn't tar every patient with the same brush, nor every GP.
Could I just say there, I agree that I wouldn't, and I know plenty of very responsible doctors, I know plenty of irresponsible ones as well, and I'm not tarring everybody. What I would say is that if that is such a major issue for GPs, that they haven't got somewhere else to send them, then wouldn't you think they'd stand up, get together and start looking for where you would send them? Because we genuinely, we have such a lack of services. Addiction services are on the floor in Ireland.
We've had a huge response on the text line. Pauline says, I would love to see these drugs prescription only. My husband was addicted to Nurofen Plus, and at one stage he was taking over 50 tablets a day. He was able to go around to different chemist shops and buy a packet in each one. Now he is off them, I think, but it's been an awful struggle. I take 8 Solpadeine a day. Codeine has me hooked and should not be available so easily. And all my friends and family are hooked. My daughter and sister take Solpadeine every 4 hours, every day, for no reason. I'm so worried about my daughter. She's only 28, and people saying, Ivan, give up the sleeping tablets. They're bad for their brain. Well, sure, Chris Donoghue's bad for my brain. There's lots of things bad for my brain, but my brain has to go. But we'll have lots more on over-the-counter and prescription drugs after the break.